right, guys, pull up forward. Let's get started. Mr. Slaughter's here to talk through the redistricting. So turn it over to you. Are you ready for
Yes,
it?
absolutely.
Go ahead, take it on.
My name is Mike Slaughter. I'm with Slaughter and Associates Urban Planning Consultants. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here and be of service to the city of Madison, a growing community for sure. I've handed out a couple of documents. One of them is really my company packet. It just gives information about my firm and the services that we offer. So some of you, or most of you, this is the first time you've met me, so this will just give you a little information without me having to bore you with talking about it. But quickly, I have an undergraduate degree in civil engineering, and I'm a licensed professional engineer, but also hold a master's degree in city and regional planning, and I'm a certified planner, and that certification is recognized nationally. Even though I have an engineering degree and I'm licensed, I don't practice engineering, I just maintain my license. I'm a 100% urban planning firm. And so this is what we do. We do a lot of annexation, comprehensive planning, zoning ordinances, subdivision regulations, and redistricting. And because we do a lot of annexation work, I do redistricting all throughout the decade as opposed to just every 10 years. So this is something that we do on a regular basis at my office. Another document I've handed out to you is really our PowerPoint presentation that I'm just going to walk you through what we have, what the typical redistricting process is, the Department of Justice requirements and Voting Rights Act requirements and so forth in the redistricting process. I also have, as far as our benchmark plan, I will explain what that is. I have 3 maps that are the same located throughout the council chambers. There's also a small version of the map in the very back of your handout of the PowerPoint presentation. So with that, Mr. President, if okay, I'll go ahead and get started on the presentation.
Absolutely.
When it comes to redistricting, the main purpose of the redistricting is the one person, one vote principle. And when we're doing that, we also want to keep in mind how that impacts the minority voting stream as well. And when we're redistricting, what we look in here in the city of Madison, we have 7 council districts. So we take the total population of the city of Madison, divide that by 7, that will be our ideal population. If we have the deviation between the largest populated district and the ideal population, plus the deviation between the smallest populated election district and that ideal, it exceeds 10%, then you're required to redistrict. What we really like to do, and this is from the Department of Justice on down, is we have that ideal population. There's no way we can hit it in each and every district. So we're going to be slightly over in some, slightly less in others. So we'd like to keep that 5% or less. 5% or less above, 5% or less below. That will sort of meet the test of the one person, one vote principle when we do that. When is redistricting a concern? Of course, if you've done annexations that annex a lot of people or a few people or whatever, you really need to redistrict, put them into a council district, even if it just happens to be vacant land. Also, another one is after the decennial census, which is the reason I'm here today. And one of the first steps we do is the benchmark plan, and I will get into that and the results of that. And that's to determine if we really need to redistrict or not, because if we had the 2020 census data, we bring that in on our on our current election district boundaries. If we weren't out of balance, then there'd be no need to redistrict. In the city of Madison's case, of course, we are out of balance, and I'll get into that more later on. The typical, and these are just typical steps that I recommend in the redistricting process. You can deviate from those, and of course, I'd be glad to defer to the council or the city attorney. But first step is to determine if redistricting is necessary, and that's referred to as our benchmark plan, and I'm gonna go over that. Typically, you provide public awareness and seek their input. You want to let the public know what's going on. Why are we changing my election boundaries? Maybe right now I'm in District 1, I may go to District 3. Why are we doing this? And then you can develop new plans as a third step. And then you provide the public review and adoption of the plan. And then, of course, you need to implement the plan, update the voter rolls, have legal descriptions for your new election districts. So that's your typical process there. And here today is, like I've said, and I'm going to get into the numbers as soon as I go through this process. We look and see if redistricting is necessary. Of course it is. The redistricting is not required if we're less than that 10%. However, we're over it, so we're going to need to redistrict. Step 2 is provide public awareness and seek public input, hold a public hearing, and develop a plan. And you see here, there's several steps we looked at, from the equal distribution of the population, where we're less than 10%. That protects our one person, one vote. That it does not have, pardon?
I have a question. You said equal, so you said maybe if you take your population divided by 7.
That's right.
Now, are you doing that just with that voting, or is that every citizen here?
That's total population. Now, we do look at voting on our map and our table that we have. That's also in my handout. We do the calculations for voting age, but redistricting is with total population is what it is. But we also provide that voting age information from you. But the total population is what you redistrict from. So we also want to make sure that our redistricting plan does not have the racially discriminatory purpose or effect, and it will not make minority voters worse off. Additional standards we like to employ is we would like to keep each and every one of you in your current district, because if we move one from one to another one, we could put more than one, and somebody's going to have to go. So we try to keep everyone in their own district, effectuate the least amount of change that we can. In this case, you're over 70% out of balance, so we're going to have some change. We want visible lines of demarcation, avoid where we can splitting census blocks. And census blocks could be, if you're downtown and there's 4 streets, that could be a census block. If you're out in a rural area, it could be a much larger census block. It could be a power line, a river, and a roadway, creating a larger census block. So they're much smaller in developed areas where you have subdivisions, whether it's commercial, residential, whatever it may be. And then, of course, we can give considerations to polling places as well as if you have precinct boundaries. Step 4 is having the public input and adoption of the plan. You can make any necessary revisions to the plan after the public input, choose the best plan, and formally adopt the redistricting plan. And then step 5 would be implementation of the plan, adopting the plan, updating voter rolls, and putting that new plan into place. Now we're going to get into some numbers. All of that was really just about the process, what the requirement is, and what the goals are that we want to accomplish. In 2010, the official census of the city of Madison was 42,938. The 2020 official census has the city of Madison at 56,933. Well, there's been a few annexations, and Mary Beth has sent that information to our office so we can have the latest boundary for the city of Madison. And I know that is not a static boundary, it is dynamic, but I want to have the latest boundary. So what we did is calculated the current population based on the 2020 with the current boundaries, and that would be 56,956.
I'm sorry, what is the block on that previous slide? What is the block count? What's the difference between those two?
All right. What that is on the we had to take the block data. I was talking about census block. There's certain the census breaks it down. There can be a census tract, which is really a large area, a census tract. It might be census tract 7,000. Well, then they will break that down into different blocks.
Okay.
And we use that data because the official census we got directly from the Census Bureau, 56,933. That's not a number I calculated. That's a number I'm reporting to you.
Mm-hmm.
The last one, the 2020 block data, is one I calculated using the 2020 census public law data. So that's the difference. That's the reason we call that the block count. We took your current population based on the decennial census, took the block data on where we'd annexed and added that to it.
Thank you.
Richard also mentioned that the Census Bureau made a change in some of the data, and that also accounted for the delta.
Yes, and some of the data for as
He said when they were generating the block count data, there was called an error. There was something that was overlooked, and so the census ended up coming up with this new number as a total for Madison.
okay. All right, thank you. And Richard is a planner in my office. That's what she was referring to there. Also the racial composition for the city of Madison, we have it for the 2010 as well as the 2020. And you can see that really from the white and black population, percentage-wise, let's see what we had in 2010. There was 74% white. In 2020, it's 66.6%. The black or minority population stayed pretty much the same, 14.6 in 2010 versus 14.8. Really, what the change was a shift in the other races, where it was American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Island, other races, or two or more races, went from 11.5% to 18.5%. So that's where there was sort of a shift there. The black population stayed pretty much the same percentage-wise. All right, this data, we have a lot of data here on the benchmark plan, and you can see on District 2, the culprits really, as far as the largest populated ward is District 2, and it's 46% out of balance. District 5 is 24.6% below population, the ideal population, so that's 70.6% out of balance. And I have all the information for each and every ward, which I have a bar chart that will make it easier to read as I go through this. But you can see we calculated the ideal population of 8,137. Again, that's the total population divided by 7. And then we were able to calculate the population by election district, and then calculate the percent difference from the ideal and the total population in each and every election district. We also have that information for voting age, as you can see on the table below, but we will be redistricting based on the total population. This makes it a little easier here. You can see graphically how each and every district population stacks up. And you can see where District 2 has a population of 11,882, District 5, 6,139, and therefore that creates our deviation of 70.6%.
And those numbers by district you got from the
Census block data. It's called public law data 74 such and such. You can see it down there. The source on that at the very bottom of slide 12, U.S. Census 2020 redistricting data, public law 94-171.
right.
And that's
The calculations in doing that, so there's margin for error, or this is actually just literally counting up the numbers based on the district lines as they exist.
Yes, this should not have any error in it on what the Census Bureau reported. Census Bureau could have somebody that employs the county.
Yeah.
But what we did, we captured just a series of the census blocks and added them up. So it wasn't a complicated step. It's not something I had to derive or come up with a methodology. Just simply capturing those census blocks, adding them up. That's what it was. Next, I have this broken down for each and every district, and I'm not going to try to dive deep into each and every one, but I thought this would be helpful to each and every council member to see what the racial composition spelled out graphically and numerically is for their particular district, as well as how it stacks up against the ideal population. And so I have those percentages graphically here. To me, it's much easier to read than that table with a lot of numbers on it, which I was struggling through earlier. This is much easier. But you can see District 2, 46% out of balance. You also see the racial composition, white, black, and other. District 3, same information. District 4, District 5, District 6, and District 7. Now, out of all of those, the only one that is in compliance, as far as I'm concerned, less than that 5% is District 7. That's the only one. Now, I will say this, when you start moving numbers around, shifting census blocks and all, I wouldn't be surprised if District 7 changed somewhat. It may not. The others, 1 through 6, I can tell you right now, will change because they're all exceed that 5% goal that we want to accomplish. And this is just our map, and that takes me through the presentation for what we're required to do. The one person, one vote principle, we want to keep in mind how it impacts the minority voting strength. Typically, and I take guidance from the mayor, council, mayor, board, whomever I'm working for. Typically, at this time, I would report to you, you're definitely out of balance. You're going to need to redistrict. So that question is answered tonight. The process could go in a couple of different ways from here. The council could direct me to just prepare a consultant's plan or working plan, whatever you want to call it, just to get it in balance, bring it back to you, and let's see how it looks. Or the council could say, hey, why don't we set up a work session? You bring your computer, you bring your GIS technician, and let's work on it here at City Hall. So it could go one of two ways. It's up to this council. So at this point, I'll turn the meeting back over to the president of the council. Be glad to answer any questions that you have.
So a couple things. One, I think when we did this in 2000, using 2010 census data, if I'm not mistaken, what council recommended at that time was to allow you to work your magic as far as getting it back in some sort of compliance, not some sort of your recommendation. At that point, you brought it back in. We then presented it and then had kind of a work session, bring in, is that how it worked last time?
That's correct, Mayor.
Then the second part is right now, what I have asked and on behalf of some of the council basically is we have a governance kind of transition committee that's looking into two questions. Should Madison stagger the council mayor elections, and if so, when? And should Madison change the current form of government, and if so, why? They're researching, going to different cities. They're going to bring that back by the end of the year to this mayor and council as far as their recommendations. Of course, they don't have to take that, but at least they'll get that information. So my question to you is, are we okay, or is it better off, since we don't really even go until 2025, to wait until the end of the year to kind of give you your next step of guidance while that committee researches and then brings it back here, at which point we then would say, let's look to go this direction?
Yes, and that's a very good question. I'm going to give you my planning consultant answer. I'm certainly not going to try to be the city attorney. You have a city attorney that could answer legally, but from a planning standpoint and from a cost efficiency standpoint, I don't see any problem with waiting since you have, the elections are so far out. So you have plenty of time to redistrict, and I'm talking about from a process standpoint. Redistrict, voter rolls updated, and all. So, and two, if you went from 7 districts to 6 districts, the work that we would do would be for naught. It would just be wasting time and money. So if you're considering that, all you have to do is direct me to put this on hold while you're studying which way you want to go with the government here. And once you decide that, you can direct me, we're ready to move forward, and we'll be ready to go at that time.
So one thing I really liked about what we did in 2010, 2011 was allow you guys to basically come back with your recommendations. That way, from the start of it, we didn't have any, as a mayor council, there was no politicalization of that. You simply looked at it, did what you felt like was in the best interest of complying with all the things that the government wants us to comply with. That then gave the community and the council members an understanding of what you considered success, but then allowed them the feedback that they wanted on both instances. So I thought it worked really well from that standpoint. But again, with the possibility, there's 3 different things we can look at: is keep it the way it is, keep it the way it is and add a city manager, which still means we're at 7 districts, or change the form of government to go to, a city manager, mayor, council, but having 6 districts and a voting mayor, at which point that gives us flexibility to let you know where to go.
And the process is this, and I know you all like this, and I'm saying this for the purpose of, because you just met me today. I like doing everything above the table, so if this council directs me to go back to my office at some point and develop that consultant plan, it doesn't mean I'm gonna be talking to you and nobody else. I'm gonna develop the consultant plan, is what it will be. And then once we get here, everyone will have an opportunity to say, hey, I sort of like it, but this area I really needed to keep, and we might make some adjustments for whatever reason it may be. But you're right, Mayor, it worked very well. I remember the process, I couldn't ask for it gone any better.
I think in the end we changed maybe a street or 2,
Right,
basically in District 5, and that was about all we did. So
exactly. So, and I work with the pleasure of the council, whatever direction.
I like that idea. I don't know lose a whole lot of people, and I really don't want to lose anybody. So having you make the first draft so that I'm not the one who has to pick and choose children, basically.
Right.
Not children, but they're my people.
Right, they're your people, right.
And I don't want to lose any of them, but obviously I'm going to lose a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be very, very difficult. So having unbiased eyes making the first draft, I think is a very good idea.
Thank you. I think so as well. But even, and there will be no, you won't hurt my feelings. If I come back, it may be in balance from one man, one vote principle and all, and I may think it's a great plan, but if it's something you all don't like, we can start over again. So, but oftentimes it is a good place to start, because we're so far out of balance right now. It's going to take some moving around, and so that's usually where our firm brings some value to the table and giving that initial working plan.
Question, with us being a city split, we're in Madison County and Limestone County, is there benefits of having one district all in one county, or did it split like it is now, or what have you seen in the past that works best?
Really, that county line is just a county line. If it worked out to where we could do that, I wouldn't say that's something that is a big requirement either way.
I said if there was benefits for it or against it, I just didn't know your thoughts on what you've seen in the past work or didn't work.
It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I would look at other things, like if across the county line there was this subdivision that wanted to be all of it in one district, if there were some underlying reasons. Just because it's a county line doesn't weigh a lot. I would look at underlying factors in that. So,
Council, one of the things, first, I know 6 folks out here, thank you guys all for coming. But Megan has a presentation, but I think, Megan, hold on, I'm gonna ask you to do it at the council meeting under my line item, because we do want to make sure, on being transparent, that we let folks know what occurred here at 4 o'clock. At the 6 o'clock meeting, we will need to do redistricting, and then it kind of gives you the ability to not only say, here was the steps, but also if we were gonna do anything different than before, here's kind of how legally it would work. If that's okay, we'll just do that then and make sure everybody's well aware of what's going on.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
Since these people did come, and they may not be able to stay for the council meeting, could Megan give us just a little preview?
I would be happy to do it twice.
No problem, it's short anyway.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just in case somebody isn't gonna be able to stay for the city council.
Could I add just a couple of things? I'll be glad to leave the 3 big maps. They're much easier for you to read. Also, I have 12 copies of these maps are still easy for you to take home and easy to read there, so I will be glad to leave these. And then I also have in my briefcase, I have about 30 copies of the table that has all the numbers on it. So if someone in the public would like to have a copy of our table that is for the benchmark plan, I have that information here as well.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
So as the mayor said, we wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about how this redistricting will fit in with Madison's potential governance transition, and also update you all on where we are in that conversation that's just started. So as you know, the mayor recently appointed a governance transition committee, and they're charged with answering 2 main questions. The first, should Madison stagger its council mayor elections, and if so, when? And the second, should Madison change the current form of government? And if so, why? And they just started meeting, they're meeting again in the morning, and they're essentially a study group, and they're gonna be reporting back to you all by the end of this year, as long as all goes well, and we can get in touch with all those people in the other cities who they wanna talk to. There will be some major decision points for everybody coming up. This is going to involve every level of state and local government, from our residents to our council members and mayor, and on up to the legislators and the governor's office. The first question is going to be whether to set staggered terms for city council members. It would take an act of the legislature to make that change, and it's kind of independent from the other question. What that would mean is that every other year, the citizens would elect 3 or 4 city council members. So you don't have full council mayor turnover every 4 years, which could introduce some instability into the government. And the next major question for them is, and for everyone really, is which form of government is going to work best for Madison going forward? And is that going to be continuing with the current mayor-council form of government as things stand now? Is that transitioning to a mayor-council form of government that we have now with 7 districts appointing a city manager? Now, I want to go ahead and put a footnote on this option number 2, because there is an option for the city council to just appoint a city manager, but there's a legal conflict because under current law, you have the mayor as having the legally defined powers of CEO, and then if the council appointed the city manager, then he or she would also have the CEO powers, and so you can see where those roles could potentially butt heads. So that's why in 2015, when another group studied this, they recommended transitioning to the official council manager form of government pursuant to the Council Manager Act of 1982 that has very defined roles for all the council members and the mayor and the council appointed city manager. So that city manager becomes, in effect, the CEO of the city, and the mayor becomes more of a member of the council. He or she would always be the presiding member of the council and would have a vote. And then you would have 6 council members under this form of government, and that's due to the legal requirements for in the Council Manager Act. And that's where we would call on Mr. Slaughter's expertise to help walk us through that. So how does redistricting fit in with these potential changes? So on the first question of staggered terms, as I said, this is kind of an independent track, but the city would have to seek permission from the state legislature, and we would have an opportunity to do that starting at the next session in January. And as I said, redistricting is just kind of a parallel track running along with that. And then if we got legislative permission, that would start in 2025. And how the current law sets it out is that the even numbered seats are, well, let me get to my notes real quick just to recap. So the odd numbered seats would start off with an initial 2-year term, and so they would start off with 2 years in 2025, and they would be up for election in 2027 and serve 4-year terms thereafter. The even numbered seats in the mayor would start off in 2025 with a 4-year term. So just a little footnote on that one. So under the second option, the city does have the option to stay with a council mayor form of government that we have now, and then redistricting could just proceed with the same city, 7 city council districts. And that's true even if the city does decide to appoint a city manager itself without transitioning to the official council manager form of government. And then, of course, under the final scenario where the city makes that transition to the formal council manager form of government, there would be one less council district, and that's because the Council Manager Act defines by law the number of council districts, and it provides that the mayor becomes a voting member. And so redistricting would need to take into account those 6 districts rather than 7. The earliest that we can know that would be mid to late 2022, because there's very specific procedures laid out in the law for making this transition, and that's what I'd like to talk to you next. So by the end of 2021, we anticipate that the Governance Transition Committee is going to issue a report and recommendation to you all about what it thinks is best for Madison. And of course, you have the background of the study that was done in 2015 and many other studies that are out there and examples of other cities who have made this change. Then in early 22, if it's recommended, the city could go ahead and request legislative approval to have staggered terms. And then if the council manager form of government is recommended, then you all can kick off that process in early 2022. And that all kicks off with a citizen petition. So the city could post a citizen petition. The law doesn't specify what form it has to be in, but it does say you have to get at least a certain percentage of voters to approve this by signing on to the petition, and that's a certain percentage of people who voted in the last election. So that is about 900 residents for Madison. If that many people sign on, then the petition comes to the mayor's desk, and he issues an election proclamation in coordination with the probate judge to set a special election. Once that's done, the city council decides what actually goes on the ballot, and you all would be tasked with approving the actual language on the ballot and saying, do you approve, the transition to a council manager form of government with 7 voting members, including 6 council seats and 1 mayor. Then the city would hold a special election, and once the results are in, the city would submit those results to the governor, the secretary of state, and the probate judge. That would be the opportunity to complete the redistricting process, because then you would know for sure how many districts the residents recommend, and whether that would be 6 or whether you would stay with the current 7. And then after that was done, then city staff would start getting the ball rolling on making this transition to the new form of government by 2025, because there would be a lot of administrative type things that we would need to take care of to do that. And that's all I have for this evening. I'd be glad to take the questions if you have any of this.
Thank you.
That's
Very good.
I'm amazed it only takes 900 signatures in a population of 57,000 people.
Any other questions? If I have any questions, comments?
Is Mr. Schreiber here for the meetings, or is this the time?
Is he staying for the council meeting?
No, Mr. Stephens.
I have one question for you, Mr. Slaughter. Whenever the time comes and you come back with your unbiased map and plans for us to start with at a work session, do you look at the areas in the city that potentially could annex more property and perhaps come back with a suggestion of perhaps less than the 8,137 for those potential districts, because you could anticipate potential growth in some districts more than others?
That would be a very good strategy.
Okay.
Certain areas that are growing more, if we can have them maybe the 5% under, and that way they would stay in balance longer.
And stack some of those that perhaps would not see that potential for annexation organization.
Yes, that would be a very good, wise strategy to do.
Okay.
And so my direction right now is just to sit tight.
Oh, yes, please.
That's what I will
We
do.
really appreciate it. Great information that we desperately needed to at least know what our next steps are.
You do need to redistrict. We'll find out how we're gonna do it, and we'll be ready whenever the city's ready. Thank you again. It's a pleasure meeting you all.
We have a lady right here who has a question. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. Want to know if that, could possibly be put on the Madison City website?
You have an
Yeah,
electronic format?
I have it.
The answer is yes. Sure can. Great question.
And I left with Mary Beth the tables. I've got 30 tables here for the public and the extra maps as well. And I will leave the 3 big maps here as well.
One more question.
Could the presentations be included on the website?
You have that in electronic format also?
I did.
Well, I've got it on that.
Yeah, I've already given it to you. That's right.
I'll get it transferred over to my.
So we can put a tab on the website for redistricting and that whole presentation and the map on there. We sure can.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe this is more for Megan. So how would you figure out which council member we would lose? That would be sad.
They would volunteer as tribute.
Cross.
That is a question I cannot answer. We would just have to go back to the drawing board essentially and start out with our total population, divide it by 6, and then go from there based on what the best balance is for the city. So, yeah, that's a question I don't want to answer at all.
Well, do have a little bit of history on that. Apparently in the 2000 redistricting, Tim Coles, who had this seat, did not want to run for re-election, and so he redistricted himself out.
It was actually in 2010 that it turned, so when you got to 2012, District 4 had said, I'm not running again, so you were able to utilize that and spread it out. So we would probably look to that if anybody had said, hey, I'm out, that makes your job a little bit easier if we do that. I've also noticed that all of them have started practicing rock, paper, scissors, which I thought was pretty interesting, so.